What? In the lecture hall of Neo University, a scream sounded from the back, interrupting the female professor who was lecturing and attracting the attention of everyone in Huianjiang. At the back of the classroom, a gentle-looking boy was panting heavily, his face covered in sweat, as if he was scooping up from the water. He sat there for a second, then looked around with wide-eyed eyes, attracting people around him. People are complaining about. It seemed that he was having nightmares while sleeping in class. And it was a very unusual nightmare. That classmate, what are you doing? On the podium, a somewhat serious female voice came from the front. The boy didn't answer, he just took out his mobile phone and looked at it as if he suddenly reacted. Then, he looked up and looked around again, with a complicated look on his face. After 2 seconds, he actually climbed up on the table and stood loudly. Said, "Attention everyone, I'll only say it once, the end of the world is coming, now, listen to my command, all stand up and leave in order." All silent. The amphitheater is lined up in rows. He is standing in the middle of the third row from the bottom right now, with people on the left and right. Everyone was stunned by his actions. "What kind of nerve are you doing here? Hurry up and sit down." Some classmates looked at him dissatisfiedly. Someone echoed, "It's just. I'm sick, disturbing me to listen to Professor Su's lecture. Would you like to go out and make trouble? Don't be grandstanding here." However, this gentle-looking boy was not embarrassed by the stares at all, and insisted, "If you are willing to believe me, leave the field and find a place to hide now, remember, stay away from the crowd, it doesn't matter if you don't believe it. In short, I can't help you 2 hours after the apocalypse, you just need to be prepared." Having said that, he followed the horizontal row, stepped on the tabletop, and walked towards the staircase aisle. Immediately, some of the classmates in that row began to be dissatisfied, complained, and disgusted. "I'm sick, I'm in class. Fuck, you stepped on the labor and management book, are you crazy? No, what are you making a fuss about? Zhou Qi, what's wrong with you?" Everyone is gossiping. At this moment, everyone's attention is disrupted by the boy named Zhou Qi, and the class cannot continue. The whole class starts to look back at him, and whispers spread throughout the classroom. "Professor Su's class dares to make trouble, this classmate is really good. It's better to say that his life is too boring. Professor Su's class, but others only dream of it, is already very happy to be able to attend. He sits in the classroom and doesn't know how to cherish it. That's right, Professor Su is so beautiful, you can just look at it, it's just an orphan. I feel like this evil pen is betting with someone on some game? Is there someone else who videotaped him? Stop talking, you see Professor Su is angry. Blah, blah, blah." The crisp sound of the heel hitting the ground seemed to condense into a field, and the tall figure slowly walked up the aisle, with a low ponytail tied with black hair, a white shirt and black trousers, exuding a strong aura, in this cold and serious place. In the process of walking all the way from the front of the classroom to the back, the students lost their voices wherever they went. The discussion resumed after she was far away. She walked along the aisle and up the stairs, just in time to meet the boy who just came down from the back of the classroom. With her arms around her chest and a lesson plan in one hand, she asked with a sense of oppression, "Where are you going?" Zhou Qi leaned over and patted the messy shirts and slacks, took a deep breath, and raised his head. "Teacher, I wasn't joking just now, organize the students to evacuate, it's still too late." Then he crossed the other side and walked forward with big strides. The female professor was slightly stiff. She paused, then turned to look at the boy's back, her star-like eyes narrowed slightly, as if to remember all the characteristics of the other party. However, at this moment, Zhou Qi, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped and turned his head as if thinking of something. "Wait a minute, are you Su Ziyun?" The voice is not loud, but it is not ignored. The discussion in the audience suddenly increased a few degrees. Is this boy sleeping stupidly? Don't even know Professor Su? Su Xiun was also a little surprised. She raised her eyebrows slightly. I am, what's wrong? Zhou Qi touched his chin. Well, it's rare to come to your class. Before he finished speaking, he made a move that shocked everyone. He actually stepped forward and grabbed Su Xiun's wrist, pulling him out of the classroom. Because it was too sudden, Su Xiun staggered, and the lesson plan in his hand was scattered on the ground. Wow! The whole class exploded. Fog grass! Who is this? What is he doing? This, how dare he? Grass, other people are just good at socializing, he is really good. Isn't he afraid of being fired? Even if he isn't fired, Professor Su isn't that easy to mess with. Hurry up and take a photo, big news. The classroom is noisy, there are also people who know the boy exclaiming, Zhou Qi. Awesome! Woohoo! Zhou Qi has known each other for almost a year. It's the first time I've seen you so fierce. Students are going well. In the commotion, Su Xiun, who was being pulled, just came to her senses at this moment. She followed slightly embarrassedly, with an ugly face. What are you doing? Zhou Qi felt her resistance, and said somewhat forcefully, You'll know in a while, come with me now. Some people began to react incorrectly. Finally, just as he dragged Su Xiun out of the aisle, a sturdy boy stopped him. I said, this classmate, there should be a limit to grandstanding, don't you think you're a little too much? Another boy who looked very tall also came over and said, classmate, if you let Professor Su go now, things won't escalate. If you continue to make trouble, it won't be as simple as failing the class. Without stopping, Zhou Qi stepped forward and patted the sturdy boy on the shoulder, looked at the tall boy at the same time, and said earnestly, just right, you two don't look weak, if you have the heart, hurry up and inform the other classes and tell them the end is coming. If anyone in this school can survive, it will be all thanks to you. After speaking, he pulled Su Xiun to pass between the two boys. Now, the whole class reacted differently. The boys and girls all started to turn around and discuss with their companions in amazement. Not quite right, who is this person? Has he not woken up yet? He doesn't seem to be joking. The whole classroom became a mess, and the two boys felt insulted, their faces were black, and they grabbed Zhou Qi directly. Zhou Qi sighed. Why bother? After speaking, he let go of the female professor's wrist. Su Xiun had a blush on his face at this time because of his gaffe. As soon as he stood up, he quickly raised his hand and said, wait! Don't do it! The two male classmates showed clear expressions in an instant, as if to say, we have our senses. But the next second, with a swoosh, Zhou Qi's figure became blurred in an instant, and with two bangs, everyone only saw the afterimage flashing, and the two tall boys had already stepped back and turned on their backs. Shock is a process. Many people have not finished their words at this time. They spit out the second half of them unconsciously, just like the black marks on the ground when the tires are locked in emergency braking. Now, everyone quiets down like death. 1 second, 2 seconds. By the time they finally reacted, Zhou Qi had already pulled Su Xiun and left the classroom. When Zhou Qi came to the corridor, he heard the room in the partition wall explode like a pot of boiling water, but he didn't respond, he just dragged Su Xiun and walked quickly in the corridor. Let me go. Su Xiun's tone was a little bumpy, but got no response. Zhou Qi's hand gripped her wrist tightly, so strong that she couldn't break free for a while, so she could only follow him into the elevator. Zhou Qi pressed the button on the first floor and the elevator door closed. Then he let go, and under the action of resistance, Su Xiun's back directly hit the elevator wall. Boom! She frowned for a moment, then raised her head, and she saw the indifferent, thin-profile face. Her face darkened slightly. Student Zhou Qi, I need an explanation, what exactly are you going to do? Zhou Qi glanced at her, didn't answer, and continued to look at the elevator door. After a stalemate for a while, the elevator came to the first floor. The door opened, and some students were waiting at the door. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com was chatting with Zheng Huan at first, but after seeing Su Ziyun, he closed his voice instantly, and his expression immediately became much better. Hello, Professor Su. Professor Su. Su Ziyun's expression was not very good looking, so he nodded slightly as a response. But the next second, Zhou Qi actually pulled her wrist again. Before she could react, she was pulled out of the elevator again and walked straight to the lobby on the first floor. Several classmates were stunned, and it took a long time to react. Fuck, I read that right. That's Professor Su. But who is that boy? Here, Su Ziyun's heart has endured to the limit. Let go. Her voice was not loud, but her tone was cold, obviously suppressing something. You can hear it, she was really angry. Zhou Qi stopped, looked back at her, and pondered, let me stress again, Professor Su, what I just said about the doomsday is not false, I am a rebirth, and I have experienced it myself, said at this point, he took out his mobile phone and glanced at it, then took out his mobile phone and continued, in 1 hour and 54 minutes, that is, at noon on May 30th, 2222, the end will come, and the whole most of the world will die. Su Ziyun's face sank when she heard the words. She threw off Zhou Qi's hand and said coldly, you probably haven't woken up from your dream, now, you need to calm down, I'll call you guide. It's all right. Zhou Qi looked at her, but I have bad news to tell you, Professor Su, in the last life, you unfortunately became a very powerful monster, and I brought you out, in fact, to kill you early. Su Ziyun took out his mobile phone for a while, then raised his head to look at Zhou Qi vigilantly. The atmosphere became dangerous. In the hall, there were boys and girls who stopped and watched from a distance, and some people got closer and tried to say hello. But seeing that Su Ziyun's aura was so strong that he couldn't even look back, they could only keep silent and leave. Zhou Qi twitched the corners of his mouth. You're scared, Professor Su? Just kidding, actually. Enough. Su Ziyun's eyes were cold, and he said in a cold tone, I have to go back to class now, I don't have time to joke with you, you can do it yourself. After speaking, she took a step back and was about to turn around and leave. Zhou Qi showed a helpless expression. The meaning of the joke is, doomsday is real, you didn't become a monster, but you became a leader, so I will pull you out. Su Ziyun made a move. Is this student crazy? Did he want to break the jar? The atmosphere in the hall became very unnatural, and more people were watching from a distance. Su Ziyun looked at the indifference and calmness on that face that did not match his age. I actually felt a slight chill in my heart. She knew that for such absurd remarks, as long as she diverted her attention, she would lose. But, why does this boy do this? He is just an ordinary college student, why did he change his appearance after a sleep? His body looks a little thin, why does he have so much strength? Can you kick two strong boys with professional fighting legs? In just a few seconds, Su Ziyun had countless thoughts flashing in her heart, but in the end, her reason prevailed, and she decided not to get involved in such troubles. So she took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Student Zhou Qi, I don't know whether you are addicted to watching novels and movies, or whether you have played too many games to make such a move, but I hope you can wake up now. Come here, you have to think about your family, if you insist on making trouble, the school will punish you strictly. Zhou Qi waved his hand, anything will do. Su Ziyun was stunned. At this time, Zhou Qi glanced at a few curious students around, and suddenly stepped forward, standing less than 20 centimeters away from her, then leaned forward, and said in a voice that only two people could hear, I'm too lazy to explain anything, so let's go, Professor Su, it doesn't matter if you don't want to go with me, I believe that with your strength, you can survive on your own. But, I will come to you, if at that time if you are still alive, can you come with me again? It's too close. The students onlookers were already shouting. Su Xiun could feel the breath of the other party. The hand on his side had already made a fist, but he still restrained the urge to wave it out. An unprecedented sense of tension and excitement surged up in my heart, a trace of unnaturalness appeared on the cold face. Oddly, she nodded. Watching Zhou Qi walk out of the hall without looking back, Su Xiun stood there and took out his phone. But after calling the police, her finger hung on the screen for a long time without falling. A few seconds later, she made another call. Beep, the phone rang twice and connected, and a brisk female voice came from inside. Hello? Professor Su De? Why did you remember to call me? Su Xiun looked at the direction of the entrance of the hall and asked coldly, Guan Xiao, do you have a student named Zhou Qi? Well, there is one. What's wrong? He's crazy. In my class, he injured 2 students and said that the end is coming. The situation is not very good. Before the accident, you can call him and ask him. Ah! A very surprised voice came from the other end of the phone. After 3 or 4 seconds, he asked in disbelief, Professor Su, aren't you making fun of me? How could such a thing happen? Okay? Well, you don't usually make jokes like this, although it's ridiculous, I still believe it, but, are you sure, it's Zhou Qi? It's him, I remember him, I'm sure. But this Zhou Qi is usually quite normal, his popularity is good, his personality is good, he's a good guy. Oh. Wait. I suddenly remembered that he seemed to have broken up with someone some time ago or something. I'll go. Know what kind of stimulation did you get? I'll go ask him. The phone hangs up. Su Xiun sighed lightly. This inexplicable farce is over. At least it's over for her. But... Su Xiun lowered his head, looked blankly at the bruise on his wrist, and put away his phone. I hope he can come back. She turned around and prepared to go back to continue the class. At this time, she suddenly heard a commotion. It came from outside the classroom building. Being beaten. Beating people. Fog grass, what's going on? Who? Seeing this scene, Su Xiun frowned and walked out. It was just in the morning, and the sun was just right. A large group of people gathered in the open space outside the teaching building. The whole audience focused on the 2 people in the center. A very beautiful girl was half squatting on the ground, panickingly calling out to the boy lying on the ground, Lin Rui. Are you okay? Lin Rui. The boy was covered in blood, foaming at the mouth, and lost consciousness. She shouted and looked up in a certain direction, her eyes full of anxiety and worry. The people around were talking a lot. Who was the boy just now? So cruel? Haven't heard of him before. Who knows what's going on? Why are you beating people? Where is the beating person? I don't know. I came out of the teaching building and ran away after beating people, but I didn't stop him. I heard that this guy named Lin Rui was the vice president of the student council or some kind of minister. He took advantage of his power to rob the boy's girlfriend, and this girl also came to humiliate him in person, so he beaten. Fuck, is it true? In that case, it's a good fight. Nonsense, that's Hua Licking from the Department of Foreign Languages, she has never been in a relationship with anyone, that boy is Zhou Qi, her friend, and she was rejected some time ago, and then Lin Rui happened to be chasing Li Qing. This didn't happen to happen just now, he wanted to find that Zhou Qi presence, but he was directly beaten. It turned out to be like this. That's a good fight. This Lin Rui is not a good guy. I heard that he uses his money to do evil everywhere. That's right. I still want to harm our foreign language department's flowers. Go to hell. At this time, someone shouted, a teacher is here. It's Professor Su. Which Professor Su? Professor Su, the most famous beauty of our Zhonghai University. Fuko, where is Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com? I just heard about it, I haven't seen a real person, let me take a look. The crowd shouted and made way. Su Ziyun walked quickly to the two of them and asked seriously, what's going on? The girl raised her head and was stunned. Professor Su. Su Ziyun, have you called the police? The girl was obviously surprised. It's not so. Su Ziyun shook his head, as for this is intentional injury. No. The girl stood up in a panic, and pointed to the boy on the ground. He was the one who started quarreling and provoking trouble. Su Ziyun raised his eyebrows. What's your relationship with Zhou Qi? The girl's face became obviously complicated, and the movements of her subordinates were a few beats slower. After 2 seconds, she replied, we were good friends. And then, after I rejected his confession, I became a stranger. Su Ziyun narrowed his eyes slightly. Immediately, he glanced around and said coldly, all spread out. Don't surround yourself here. The crowd immediately became quiet for a few minutes, and began to disperse in 2s and 3s. Become sparse very quickly. Where did he go? Su Ziyun asked. I have no idea. I can help him. The girl hesitated for a moment. He stole Lin Rui's car keys and went to the parking lot. Su Ziyun nodded, and calmly ordered, send him to the hospital as soon as possible, or something will really happen. Then he turned his head and walked quickly away, towards the parking lot. The parking lot of Zhonghai University is open air. Zhou Qi walked in quickly, and with the guidance of the key, he came to a red Ferrari that was somewhat annoyed. Open the door. The inside of the car is bells and whistles, but it is quite clean and has no odor. Throw away all useless decorations and clutter, open the front trunk and empty it. Then Zhou Qi got into the driver's seat and adjusted the seat. Start the car. The phone is ringing. Zhou Qi glanced at it casually, and the note indicated that the university instructor. When he picked up the phone, he just said, long story short. Guan Xiaogang on the other end of the phone wanted to blame him for not answering after so many calls, but he was choked up by Zhou Qi and didn't say a word for a long time. Until, boom, the sound of the engine sounded. Wait. Zhou Qi. Where are you now? I am driving. Zhou Qi said it as it should be, while steering the steering wheel skillfully with one hand. The car body withdrew from the parking space at high speed, and then stopped suddenly in place. Not a small movement attracted the attention of some people in the distance. Where did you get the car? Zhou Qi, wait, have you been in a bad mood recently? The teacher understands you, but you should calm down first and don't do anything impulsive. Mr. Guan, Professor Su told you something, I hope you believe me, the end is coming, get ready. If you survive, I will come to save you. Then he hung up the phone and turned off the phone. The next second, this Ferrari, which was usually not very publicized, let out an emperor-like roar, turned into a wild horse, rashly broke into the avenue, and ran away. Even, at the end of the road, there was a thrilling and exciting drift, accompanied by a harsh scratching sound, and disappeared at the intersection. Fuck, so handsome. A passing male classmate had already forgotten about the rest at this time, and only looked at the road with black tire marks in the distance, where the Ferrari disappeared, muttering to himself, unable to return to his senses for a long time. The other side. Guan Xiao, who had dialed Zhou Qi number again but was told that the phone was turned off, his wide eyes filled with confusion. This Zhou Qi, so good, what's going on? But the car couldn't go very far. Almost as soon as he accelerated, he braked violently and stopped in the middle of the road. Because someone was standing there. Su Ziyun. Lang Yan's delicate face walks with scattered strands of hair, and the white shirt is slightly soaked in sweat, which outlines the curve of the figure, along with the ups and downs of the chest, adding a wonderful allure. On top of that, her eyes were calm and deep, looking at Zhou Qi through the car window. Zhou Qi didn't know what to say. In the apocalypse, he has seen a lot of powerful women, crazy, bold, impulsive. But this is the first time he has seen a woman's courage in reality. Facing a sports car with a speed of more than 100 yards, he dared to stop it at a distance of tens of meters. If it wasn't for his eyesight, if he didn't operate well, if it weren't for the high-quality braking system of this car. Many students around were exclaimed, "This bright red Ferrari is too eye-catching," not to mention a beautiful woman standing in front of the car. Wait. Why does that beauty look a little familiar? But Su Xiun didn't give them a chance to confirm. She had already walked quickly to the co-pilot, pulled the door open and sat in. "Fix your seat belt." Zhou Qi didn't look at her, and ordered casually. Su Xiun cast a glance at him, quickly inserted the seat belt into the buckle, and asked, "Where are you going?" Zhou Qi said seriously, "Go to a safe place and wait for the end." Then the sound waves rolled, and the car body rushed out with a bang. Su Xiun was arranging his hair, trying to tie back the messy ponytail, but because of the accelerator, his upper body leaned on the back of the chair. She gave Zhou Qi a deep look. But he still didn't say anything, just straightened his hair silently. It wasn't until the car body became stable and the noise subsided that she asked in a cold tone, "I heard that you confessed to that girl not long ago and were rejected." Zhou Qi wondered, "Which one?" Su Xiun's beautiful eyebrows wrinkled, "Why did you hit that boy just now?" "Because he happened to be holding the car keys." "What about that girl?" There was silence in the car for a while. Zhou Qi didn't seem to hear the same thing, didn't answer, just focused on driving. A drop of sweat dripped from Su Xiun's pretty chin, and she felt irritated inexplicably. For some reason, she lost her aura in front of this student, and the other party could always easily disrupt her rhythm. At this time, the car had already driven out of the school under the shocked and admiring eyes of countless people. Finally, she couldn't help but ask again, "Since you said the end is coming, why didn't you take that girl with you? Don't you like her?" Zhou Qi shook his head. "I don't like it long ago, and it's useless to take her." Su Xiun turned his head and stared at Zhou Qi with dark and cold eyes. "It's useless. Well, every time she dies very early, her character is destined to not live long in the end." Zhou Qi said something casually, then glanced at the rear-view mirror. Su Xiun felt a kind of perfunctory. The other party obviously paid more attention to driving and didn't answer her question seriously, but she couldn't say anything. But she immediately reacted, "You just said, every time." The next second, when Zhou Qi was overtaking, he spit out a sentence, "Yes, I have been reborn many, many times. The time of waking up is different each time, and the appearance of the doomsday outbreak is also different." The sky outside was clear and the sun was shining brightly, but Su Xiun was suddenly a little depressed. "I don't know if it's because of the other party's attitude or because of what the other party said." But she immediately realized that something was wrong, and immediately rubbed her forehead, trying to calm herself down. She found herself completely in each other's rhythm. It seems that, before she knew it, she was about to believe that the end of the day was real. Thinking back, why did you get in the car? Are you afraid that this student will really do something stupid? Or are you really so curious about the doomsday? Do not. Neither. It should be to pursue a feeling. It's like a stone falling into the calm water. Su Xiun looked straight ahead. The road was wide, cars were coming and going, prosperous and chaotic, everything was as usual. But at this time, this Ferrari was like a live fish, scurried nimbly in the traffic, and the manipulator was a college student who was just a few minutes ago. She didn't know how to describe the scene in front of her. After being silent for a while, she asked, "Maybe it's because of what you did that caused the butterfly effect." Zhou Qi glanced at her in surprise, then shook his head, "No, the focus of Doomsday is not people and things, but rules. Rule. Yes. He organized the language and explained slowly, it's like a game where some people become monsters and some people become warriors. Warriors can upgrade by killing monsters, and monsters can evolve by eating warriors. The world is divided into regions, each region is equivalent to a copy. If you successfully pass through, you can get rewards. But what kind of content will appear in each dungeon, even I, the regenerator, can't be sure, because the randomness of the game will regenerate with me. This is actually a very scary and desperate thing, which means that my rebirth is in the game's plan. There was only Joe Key's calm voice in the car. In stark contrast to his indifferent appearance is the wild driving state of the body. The sound of the engine always echoed in my ears. The car passed one red light after another, and passed countless slow cars. At this time, Suzaun seemed to have something unraveled in his heart, and his face, neck, and ears were all stained with an abnormal blush. A strange feeling surged in my heart. However, at the same time, there was an uncomfortable feeling of dizziness. Squeak! The car drifted around the corner again and came to a fairly smooth road. At this time, Zhou Qi suddenly asked, "Then, Professor Su, you should be able to understand why I wanted to pull you along in the first place, right? Because, useful?" Su Ziyun knew what the other party meant, but she didn't want to say a word at this time, because she was motion sickness. She could only hold the handrail tightly and leaned her body against the car window to resist the dizziness. Sure enough, Zhou Qi explained to himself, "I said before that you are a leader, it is true, and you are always a leader, you. In the end, you are of great significance to mankind." He turned his head and glanced. Unfortunately, the jokes before that were true. You turned into a monster more often, and I was killed by you several times. Su Ziyun clenched his hand on the armrest of the car, and asked with some difficulty, "Monster, what does it look like?" "It's terrifying. Most people will die if they encounter it. How about you?" I'm not afraid of them, so they can't see me." Su Ziyun wanted to ask more. At this time, she heard the sound of the car window opening. The internal and external sound waves echoed together, and the world suddenly became noisy and noisy, but it also brought fresh, well, at least the flowing air. She didn't move, feeling her hair being ruffled by the wind. She silently closed her eyes. I don't know how long it took. Su Ziyun felt that the roar of the engine weakened and disappeared, the wind stopped, and everything became quiet. Then, it was Zhou Qi's voice, "Professor Su, I'll go down and buy something, wait for me." Su Ziyun slowly opened his eyes upon hearing this, and his pupils slowly returned to focus. Then I heard a bang, the sound of the door closing. She turned around in surprise. Found that the other party really got out of the car. Su Ziyun looked at his back with a strange look in his eyes. Isn't she afraid of running away? And after a few seconds, she lowered her head, took out her phone slowly, looking at the screen that is still showing the status of the call. She said lightly, "Did you hear that? Dr. Yu?" Zhou Qi didn't buy much. The only food was some bread, chocolate, and canned food, and 2 boxes of mineral water. About a few days. Put these things in the front trunk. He got back into the driver's seat. Su Ziyun asked lightly, "If it's the end of the world, why don't you buy more?" Zhou Qi closed the car door and explained, "It's useless to buy too much. If we need to fight or run away from the beginning of the apocalypse, we can't run with them." "But you just said you were looking for a safe place." "Yes, but Professor Su, you have to know that safety is only relative. When the end comes, you don't know what will happen to your place: extreme cold, extreme heat, ghost invasion, failure of physical rules, or what?" Zhou Qi pointed to the back, "Or the bread knight, the mineral water magician, etc., who were activated by the item and killed." Su Ziyun blinked. Then she turned her head to look in front of the car, and 2 seconds later, the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. Zhou Qi happened to see her appearance in his eyes. After a pause, only then turned around and restarted the car. "It's pretty nice to laugh," he muttered softly amid the roar of the engine. "It's just that I'm not very lucky, I always turn into a monster." The two didn't go too far this time, because when they stopped, they were already close to the suburbs, so the car stopped after less than 10 minutes of driving. On the empty road, there is no trace of the city, the grass is tiled on both sides of the road, and there are many trees. Not far away, covered by greenery, are huge concrete buildings, and dilapidated factories. Su Xiun took a long time to identify it. It was an abandoned factory in the western suburbs of Zonghai City. She seldom comes here, and she is not familiar with it. But she knew that this place was remote and deserted, and almost no one passed by. Zhou Qi got out of the car quickly and took the supplies out. Su Xiun didn't say much, unfastened his seat belt, and got out of the car. Then, the two walked into the factory one after the other. "I can understand that, are you kidnapping me?" Su Xiun suddenly asked after looking at Zhou Qi back while holding a box of mineral water. Zhou Qi took a step. "Why do you say that?" "Because your knife is exposed." "Ah, this." Zhou Kikong touched his waist and turned his head a little embarrassedly. "It's the end of the world, always prepare some weapons." "What about the rope?" Zhou Qi glanced down, took a step back in silence, and stood side by side with Su Xiun. Then he explained with a serious face, "The rope is a very practical tool, it has been used since ancient times, and it is the same in the apocalypse, escape, rock climbing, traps. It can be used everywhere, don't underestimate it, at critical times, it is of great use." Su Xiun nodded thoughtfully. The two casually found a place with a wide view and a shady place to sit down. Zhou Qi took out his phone and turned it on. At this time, Su Xiun asked, "Is it safe here?" Zhou Qi looked up at her with a serious face. "Of course, the safest place in the entire Zonghai city is here, this is the edge of the copy, the rules have little influence, it is not so dangerous, there are few people, it is open, and the traffic is convenient, as long as it's not an extreme situation, you can stay here for at least half a month." Su Xiun frowned again, "But you only bought food for a few days." Zhou Qi paused. "I said go, not to hide all the time, but to use this place as a stronghold, or a novice village, we have to go out from time to time to get supplies, and kill monsters to upgrade." Su Xiun didn't speak, staring at him thinking about something. Zhou Qi looked at the phone and found that it was already turned on. He ignored a lot of information, first called up the map, zoomed in, and then showed it to Su Xiun. "Look, it's not far from the old city, and monsters can't come here. We can go there, and then slowly move towards the city center after it develops, and soon we can knock down this area. Then, we are on the edge of this area. If the rules of this area are difficult to fight, you can go to other areas to pass the level." "Understood." Su Xiun nodded and stopped talking. Then he took out his mobile phone and started to operate. Zhou Qi didn't say anything, he lowered his head and fiddled with his cell phone. At this moment, there is less than an hour before the end of the world. He has already found a relatively safe place. What he has to do now is to find a way to explain it to the people he knows, and to provide them with as much help as possible. These people are not only Zhou Qi relatives and friends, but also some people he knew well in his previous life, got along well, and had good personalities and abilities. But, to tell the truth, in fact, he has no feelings for these people now, whether it is relatives, friends, or comrades in arms, whether they are dead or alive, Zhou Qi no longer cares, because he has already watched those people die. Many, many times, even just watching the world go to ruin at least a dozen times. Even Su Xiun next to him, if it wasn't for her rebirth in her class, Zhou Qi wouldn't go to her specifically, or drag her away. "I'm not familiar with him, so a symbolic invitation would be considered respect. And this time she was able to take the initiative to find it purely by accident. Therefore, sending a message to remind others of this operation is more like a mechanical work. Doing it or not doing it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the result is the same, it's more just a habit. Soon, he has sent a few messages out. Just then, a phone call suddenly came. It's her counselor, Guan Xiao. Zhou Qi picked it up. Hello. There seemed to be stunned for a moment, but then a panicked voice came, Zhou Qi. It's me. You're on the phone. God, you really want to me off. Do you know how much trouble you've caused? Guan Xiao seemed to be walking, her voice fluctuated and her breath was short. But soon, she stopped, took a deep breath and whispered, Where are you now? Forget it, don't care, Zhou Qi, listen to the teacher's advice, hurry back to school, take the initiative to admit your mistake, and try to solve it privately. What are you usually? This kind of person is obvious to all. If there are any grievances and difficulties, the school will not embarrass you too much, and the teacher will help you. Thank you, teacher, but I didn't suffer any grievances. You are overly concerned. Zhou Qi's tone was calm. On the other end of the phone, Guan Xiao was left speechless by this sentence. This kid, didn't he hear what he meant in his words? What I mean is that no matter how big a mistake you make, you should put the blame on others first, or find some reasons for yourself, at least you can reduce the punishment a little bit. But he actually refused. Guan Xiao suddenly felt that a good heart had been wrongly paid. She held it back for a long time, and then she said, do you think you are very powerful? It's okay, it's not that great. God TM is okay. Guan Xiao's liver hurt from choking, and finally he couldn't help but said angrily, You don't think about yourself and your family? Do you still want a diploma? Do you know? You know, Professor Su is known as the most ruthless professor in Zhonghai University. If you mess around in her class, you won't have to think about her class in the future. Listening to Guan Xiao's words, Zhou Qi couldn't help but look at Su Ziyun who was sitting beside him. At this time, the breeze just happened to blow, blowing the hair on her forehead, adding a touch of vividness to her deserted profile. It's okay, I have a good relationship with Professor Su. Zhou Qiro said with interest. Su Ziyun glanced at him when he heard the words. There was silence on the phone for 2 seconds. Zhou Qi, when did you learn to talk nonsense? I've been with her for so long, and I've never seen her get along well with any student. Real. Forget it, Guan Xiao took a deep breath, and said loudly, Then what about you hitting someone? You said you would do it, and now the 2 classmates you hit are mad, shouting that they will how are you, and that Lin Rui, who was sent to the hospital and still hasn't woken up yet. Aren't you adding a burden to your family? Everyone has money and power in their families, if you insist on pursuing them what should I do? Also, you even dared to rob someone's car. I don't even know what to say to you. Do you know that if you do these things, if someone calls the police, your life will be ruined? Call the police? Zhou Qi blinked and looked at Su Ziyun aside. She glanced at the phone in her hand again. It's broken. I forgot to call the police. This woman, shouldn't she backstab herself at a critical moment? He stretched out his hand enough. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com took Su Ziyun's mobile phone very naturally, and after looking at it twice, he breathed a sigh of relief. He found that the other party was actually talking to a few students about the course arrangement and homework. Zhou Qi looked at Su Ziyun a little speechlessly, and found that she was looking at him quietly. He couldn't help thinking about this woman, she is quite dedicated, and it will be the end of her life. She has not forgotten her work. At this moment, Guan Xiao's voice came from the phone next to his ear. I said, Zhou Qi? Did you hear it? Zhou Qi came back to his senses and realized that he and Guan Xiao had been on the phone for too long. He changed the subject directly and asked, Mr. Guan, is your boyfriend Gao Peng? How long have you been dating? Ah? It's been more than half a year. What's wrong? Guan Xiao was obviously stunned by the question, and answered subconsciously, but then she responded, wait, how did you know? I didn't tell anyone, and this what does it have to do with him? Why are you asking this? Zhou Qi, did you hear what I just said? Zhou Qi thoughtfully said, first of all, your boyfriend is a good man. Although he usually looks straight, he will stand in front of you to protect you every time he finds you at the end of the day. But, it should be said that there seems to be a green tea sister beside him, who has hooked up with him several times, so you need to save some snacks. Guan Xiao on the other end of the phone was stunned. She really wanted to refute, and wanted to emphasize not to mention doomsday anymore. And then I want to say that now the focus is on this. Isn't the point of your jokey life and death? However, she froze for a long time, and in the end, her attention to Sister Green Tea prevailed. She asked dryly, what's that girl's name? Hanging up Guan Xiao's call, Zhou Qi accelerated the speed of sending messages to some people. But the phone calls from family and friends came one after another. He can only pick up important ones, and try to briefly tell some little secrets that he shouldn't know to gain the trust of others. Moreover, because the time was too short, he could not explain and prove it patiently as before, and let them understand the end of the day little by little and adapt to the danger. It can only be a more targeted reminder. They believe it or not, as long as they have a preparation in their hearts, that's fine. If you force an explanation, it will only be unclear in the end, and it will be really dangerous. When there were still 28 minutes before the end, he finally finished sending some important information. I don't know if they will be able to see it, and even if they see it, will they be able to prepare in time? At this time, Su Ziyun suddenly stood up. Zhou Qi glanced sideways, and suddenly, he felt that seriousness was regained. These long legs, slender waist, and a figure that bulges forward and backward, are obviously beautiful, but they make people feel extremely oppressive. The powerful and tidy aura spread, and even Zhou Qi was still thinking, if he could give her a windbreaker, it would be even more sassy. But then he reacted. Like. There are sirens. The police are here. Su Ziyun said lightly. I heard it. Zhou Qi also stood up. He glanced at it from a distance, then turned to look at Su Ziyun. Did you really call the police? He asked. Su Ziyun also turned around and looked at him calmly. Aren't you going to run? Why should I run? If you don't run, you will be caught. Zhou Qi sighed slowly. Professor Su, you're a bit too much. If you don't believe me, just ignore me, or just let the police come and arrest me. But you all came with me. What do you mean by calling the police again? I didn't call the police. Su Ziyun shook his head, then stared at him. Then what are you going to do now? Zhou Qi thought for a while and said, Professor Su, now there are 27 minutes before the end. Because of your misconduct, our original harmonious relationship has been broken. You need to hold me hostage for 27 minutes. Okay. Su Ziyun nodded, holding both hands out. Hey! Zhou Qi looked confused. What are you doing? Tie me up. Su Ziyun said expressionlessly. Zhou Qi was a little out of touch with this woman. This is also too cooperative. But why does it feel like something is wrong? Su Ziyun seemed to see his doubts, and explained again, didn't you say that there is a high possibility that I will become a monster? This is also a little safer. When Zhou Qi thought about it, it seemed to be true. So he took out the rope. Just as he was about to tie it, he felt that it was not safe to tie it in front of him, so he simply pulled the other party's hand behind him and tied it up, then took the other end of the rope and tugged it twice. Okay, Professor Su, let's go. Su Ziyun turned his head to the side and glanced at Zhou Qi coldly. but he didn't say anything after all, just got up and walked silently ahead. The two walked to a corner of a certain factory and sat down. The siren was very close, and the sound of tires pressing across the road could still be heard. Sounds like at least 3 or 4. And Zhou Qi looked at Su Xiun, who was sitting not far away, nothing to do with himself, and a look of indifference. Inexplicably feeling a little angry. On the surface, this woman is calm, but she must have done a lot of bad things in secret. No wonder I can become a leader. I have a dirty heart in playing layouts. Looking back on the past, he was reborn so many times, but whenever he had contact with this woman, Zhou Qi never took advantage of it, and he was not less cheated. If she wasn't really important to humans. Zhou Qi clenched his fists. The more he thought about it, the more angry he became, and he had the urge to beat this woman up. But no, not only can he not fight, he has to find a way to protect this woman. Well, protection. After all, what if the police here turn into monsters? With his current strength, he has no problem protecting himself, but what about this woman? If she didn't turn into a monster this time, but survived, but was killed by the monster, then Zhou Kike would feel uncomfortable. Thinking of this, he turned around, sighed, and muttered softly, "You just rely on your special status, but you can work hard. If you turn into a monster in a while, how will I deal with you?" After being quiet for a while, Zhou Qi looked sideways, only to find that Su Xiun was staring at him. He was not embarrassed, and said confidently, "Look at what you have done, we have to run away before the end of the day, and our plans have been disrupted." Su Xiun turned around. Just when Zhou Qi thought that the other party didn't want to take care of her, she suddenly said in a cold tone, "If the doomsday really doesn't come this time, what will you do?" Zhou Qi was stunned. He really hadn't thought about this issue, or rather, he hadn't thought about it for a long time. At least, no one has been able to ask him this question in the last few doomsdays. He thought for a while and said, "Then I won't come." Su Xiun looked ahead, "But you will be punished by the school, expelled, sentenced, and imprisoned." "Never mind." The atmosphere was silent for a while, and Zhou Qi suddenly sighed and said, "Professor Su, I understand what you mean. In fact, I have already tried many things." "Like what?" Su Xiun asked. "For example, a long time ago, I also had a very subtle time, thinking, what if the doomsday doesn't come? So all preparations were made on the premise of not affecting other people's lives, but it didn't make much sense. It's time to come, it will still come, how can I live for a while longer? Also, when I was very indulgent, there were times when I did a lot of absurd and outrageous things in order to make others believe me, or just to vent my emotions. Sometimes he was shot on the spot, and sometimes he was put in a mental hospital." After speaking, Zhou Qi paused. "Until now, I don't have any feeling about those things. If the end does not come, I may be very happy, maybe feel relieved, but I won't regret it." Su Xiun fell silent again. In the brief silence, there was only the sound of the siren from the outside world. The sound of the car has stopped. "Maybe, the police have gotten out of the car and are approaching here." She said again, "No matter how many times you die, will you go back to the end?" Zhou Qi thought for a while, "Yes, no matter when or where I die." Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com will randomly return to a certain time within a year before the end of the world. Well, it could be several months, weeks, or days or hours before the doomsday. For example, this time it was 2 hours before the doomsday. I used to kill myself and start over again after a bad start, but I found out later that it doesn't matter how the game starts, the result is the same. Have you tried asking the country for help? I tried. When the preparation time is relatively long, the country is still strong. If you are fully prepared, the doomsday is almost a horizontal push at the beginning, but it is useless, because the meaning of the doomsday is not there. What is the meaning of the end? Zhou Qi gave Su Ziyun a strange look. Is this woman finally feeling nervous, knowing that the doomsday is really coming, but instead she is interested in asking questions? Why did you go early? He casually said, I don't know. You said it was a game before. Well, that's understandable. And the point of the game is to clear customs. About the same. You've been reborn so many times, but haven't you seen the end? Can't wait to answer. As soon as Su Ziyun turned his head to look, he felt the rope tightening, and the wrist that had been rubbing for a while was strangled, causing pain. She noticed that Zhou Qi's face was a little impatient. Where do you get so many questions? Su Ziyun didn't speak anymore. But Zhou Qi didn't let her go. He stepped forward and bound her feet 3 times. Then he got up and patted the ashes on his body, and said indifferently, I'll deal with those police officers, and the rest. When the end comes, you'll know everything. Inside the abandoned factory, overgrown with weeds, the ground is full of broken cement and boards. When looking from a distance, there is still a bleak beauty, but when you look closer, only decay and desolation are left. Several policemen came forward, looking at them as they walked. The police officer at the head is a little older, looks stable, has deep eyes, and has a more restrained aura. He kept observing the traces on the ground, and finally, he stopped. Looking at the empty and messy factory not far away, after pondering for a while, he took out his loudspeaker and shouted, Student Zhou Qi, your family is very worried about you. They are already on their way to and from Zonghai City. I hope you can come out and talk and tell them in person that you didn't do anything stupid, to reassure them. The other side, Zhou Qi listened carefully, but did not respond. He was just playing with a fruit knife in his hand, thinking that this policeman would really bluff people. They have already told me to stay at home. Oh, no. Zhou Qi suddenly thought that his rebirth was 2 hours before the apocalypse. In the original normal timeline, he was really depressed for a while due to various reasons such as his failure to confess. Even if he did not take the initiative to tell his family, the family also learned about his problems through other means, so. Therefore, the family should be in a state of worry about him now. No matter what he says or does, he may be regarded as mentally abnormal, and it is not impossible for him to come all the way. But it doesn't matter anymore, just come here, maybe it's safer on the road than at home. Zhou Qi thought. On the other side, the older policeman walked forward tentatively and continued, Zhou Qi, everything you are doing now has not constituted a serious crime. You give up your resistance now and come out on your own, and you will receive the lightest sentence. If there are special reasons, you can even be detained without imprisonment. Go back to school and continue studying, but if you keep making mistakes, no one can help you. Zhou Qi didn't know what to say when he heard the words, it's still this rhetoric, I've heard it 800 times. He has encountered this scene many times before in similar, large and small incidents. Sometimes, I really feel that there is no need to resist, so I really put down my weapons and surrender, but the result is definitely not as good as the other party said, often being rushed up by a group of people and pressed to the ground, or being shot down. But those are not important. Now that the end is coming soon, he doesn't want to waste time with these police officers. He opened his mouth and said, You didn't know the situation before you came? I came out for refuge, not kidnapping. Outside the factory, several police officers looked at each other. The bandits' location has been determined, and can communicate, this is a good thing. After a pause, the senior policeman continued, Student Zhou Qi, you may not know that the messages you sent have been taken seriously. Through the information you provided, scientists in many fields outside the world have already launched investigations. I found some incentives that may lead to the end. Zhou Qi, as long as you are willing to lay down your weapons, the country will remember your credit. As he spoke, he stepped into the factory building. At the same time, he calculated in his heart that another team of police officers should also be there. At this time, boom! Boom! Suddenly, there was a strong crash in the factory building. A neat blow, and the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground. The older policeman knew that the matter should be over. Ready to enter the factory. However, the next second, a young voice came from within, "Liar, there is no incentive for the doomsday outbreak. There are the last 2 minutes." Inside the factory building, Zhou Qi clapped his hands, looked at the police officers in front of them whose hands and feet were tied and scattered in various positions, and nodded with satisfaction. "Okay, everyone, I may have taken offense a bit, but this will really keep you safe, and you'll thank me later." But obviously, no one took what he said seriously. Several policemen were staring at him with angry eyes. On the contrary, the older one was very calm. He looked at Zhou Qi silently, and for a long time, he said, "It can be seen that you really didn't mean to hurt us. Now, I kind of believe that the end is real." These words attracted the attention of others. Zhou Qi looked at him a few times, and suddenly said thoughtfully, "I remember, you are Zhang Xiansheng." The older policeman said calmly, "Yes, I am. Sorry, I didn't recognize it just now, I'm offended." Zhou Qi looked at him, and said with a sigh, "In the end, you are one of the few people I admire. You can always adapt quickly and bring a large number of people have survived, and I have cooperated with you a few times. But unfortunately, you seem to have some disease, stomach cancer, or something. It is rare to live more than half a year." The other people's eyes immediately went wrong, and they looked at Zhang Xiansheng subconsciously, waiting for him to refute. Zhang Xiansheng did not answer. No denial, no affirmation. Just silence. Zhou Qi continued with great interest, "This encounter is also fate, why don't we cooperate again? That woman will probably become a monster, or you should be more reliable, and I still have a way to cure your illness. Now, it's not a problem to live 2 more years. What do you think?" Zhang Xiansheng narrowed his eyes. But still no answer. Zhou Qi didn't care either, he glanced at everyone again and said, "There's 1 more minute, everyone. I know, you may not be able to imagine why the doomsday crisis suddenly broke out, and why it sounds so playful, but unfortunately, after being reborn so many times, I don't know why. This may be a slight energy fluctuation in our position in the universe, or it may be a little joke played by high-dimensional life for us. Perhaps, our world, which was created by God, could not support it any longer. But in fact, no matter what the reason is, I just want to say that the end of the world, literally, is the destruction of the world and the end of civilization. As human beings, we can't do anything, we can only live hard." Zhou Qi said as he walked towards Su Xiun in the corner. At this moment, she was leaning against the wall, her head lowered, and she was motionless, looking like she was asleep. Everyone saw the fruit knife that Zhou Qi was holding in their hands, and they all became nervous and said loudly, "Put down the knife. Stop. Don't be impulsive." But apparently they couldn't stop it, all he could do was watch him aim the blade at Su Xiun's neck. At this time, Su Xiun opened his eyes and looked at Zhou Qi. There was not a trace of fear in those eyes, only the depth and tranquility of water. Zhou Qi suddenly said seriously, "Professor Su, as a compatriot, I sincerely hope that you can survive as a human this time. But if you become a monster, I will kill you as soon as possible to ensure that you will not feel any pain." The voice didn't fall, sudden, the surrounding environment suddenly dimmed a bit. A chill swept through. Everyone felt a kind of heart palpitations and became nervous. But Zhou Qi's brows were wrinkled. Has the time come? Why, not feeling that way. Seeing that Su Xiun hadn't turned into a monster, his dark pupils were still staring at him quietly, Zhou Qi put down his dagger, got up, and stepped back. When he turned to look at other people, his thoughts flashed like lightning this time, it seems that the bet is successful. Su Xiun did not become a monster, but with so many people here, there should always be someone who wants to change. Well, the ban was not issued for the first time, it was not a forbidden area. There are slight changes in the environment, and there is a high probability that it is a natural disaster area. So, what are the regional rules? Rainstorm? Snowstorm? Or, is it a special area? Lost color? Matte? Fog? Or the dark realm? And many more. Zhou Qi frown deepened. It's been several seconds, why hasn't one changed? So lucky this time? He looked back and forth at the people in the field, and he became more and more puzzled. When the doomsday comes, the whole world will be submerged by an energy force field, and people will have a wonderful sense of expansion and contraction. Then, the force field is like the ebb and flow of the tide, covering the entire beach and then quickly fading. At that time, the world began to change drastically, and whoever would become a monster. But at this moment, that feeling did not come. Immediately afterwards, Zhou Qi found that the environment did not continue to change. What's the matter? He murmured, and walked quickly to the door of the factory building, squinting his eyes to look at the world. Except for some gloom, everything is business as usual. But the next second, he suddenly saw that the clouds covering the sun floated away, and the bright light shone down, and everything returned to its original state. Zhou Qi was stunned. However, at this moment of distraction, he felt the wind blowing behind him. Boom! Before he could react, the violent impact made his eyes blur for a moment. When he recovered from the pain, he found that he was lying on the ground, being held firmly. Zhou Qi felt the touch behind him and asked blankly, "When did you untie the rope?" Just. Su Xiun locked his arms mercilessly and put his knees on his back. The strength was so great that Zhou Qi couldn't help humming. This woman, it's rare to see her move her hand once, it's really cruel. As expected of her. But then, Zhou Qi suddenly showed a strange look. Because he felt that Su Xiun used the exact same method to tie his hands behind his back. "Professor Su, you are taking revenge." "Yet." Su Xiun replied lightly. Zhou Qi's mouth twitched. This woman, at this time, he became frank. Soon, the leg that was pressing on the back was released. Zhou Qi didn't struggle, just lay down on the spot with his whole body relaxed, waiting quietly. Waiting for the other party to leave, untie the other policeman. Then a group of people came and held him tightly, pull him up again, extrusion out of the factory. Until he got into the police car, Zhou Qi did not resist at all. Because at this moment, what he cares most about is, the doomsday seems to have not come. Click! The flash of the camera brought Zhou Qi back to his senses. He suddenly realized that he had been sent to the Public Security Bureau and registered to take pictures. "Turn around, sideways!" Someone commanded not far away. Zhou Qi turned around silently. Click! "Turn back, the other side." Click! "Okay, take it away." Two policemen stepped forward and escorted Zhou Qi away. Not far away, the policeman who was operating the computer couldn't help but sighed when he saw the photo. This kid, looking at Sven, doesn't look like someone who hides his heart. Why is he so daring? Robbery, kidnapping, assaulting the police, and so on. What did he dare not do? Then he turned around and asked, "I said, his thin arms and thin legs are really as powerful as you said? He knocked you all down in 3 or 2 strokes." Standing beside him was a young man with ordinary appearance, wearing plain clothes, but he was one of the members of the operation to arrest Zhou Qi. The young man had a complicated expression. He looked at Zhou Qi's photo, and then looked at the direction where Zhou Qi was leaving. He opened his mouth and hesitated for a long time before saying, "It's really amazing." Tisk, the policeman who was operating the computer smacked his lips when he heard the words, and said for a long time, "That's really shameful." The other side, Zhou Qi was taken into an interrogation room. In a fairly spacious room, the walls are neatly white and blue, and the tables and chairs are beige. There are no windows, but the overall tone is bright and it looks quite comfortable. There were no obstacles such as iron bars and glass in front of the prisoner's location. There was only a solitary chair with special characteristics, with iron bars for fixing the body and linking the handcuffs. When Zhou Qi sat down, he could see the words "Be lenient in confession," and "Be strict in resistance" on the wall in front of him, as well as the camera. Then, the policeman put his hands on the chair and instructed, "Wait here for a while." Then he turned and left. Zhou Qi was left alone in the interrogation room. Zhou Qi shook his arm and found that he couldn't even raise his hand, but he was not angry, just looked around with interest, and said to himself, "I haven't been here for a long time." After all, the last time he dealt with officials and law enforcement officers in normal time was before a dozen rebirths. In these dozen or so openings, although his behavior is more casual, he can do whatever he wants. But because I didn't have too much conflict with others, I just prepared silently, so until the end of the day, it didn't attract much official attention. In other words, the last time he came to this kind of place, at least, was 60 or 70 years ago. And this time, it's actually a little surprising. First of all, the time until the end of the apocalypse erupted was relatively short, and he was in a place with more people, so he would definitely leave as soon as possible. As a result, just because of entanglement with that woman for a while, things started to develop beyond control. One small incident after another, the casual handling again and again, plus the woman's secret operation, directly at the last moment, all the contradictions are connected together. It caused him to inevitably have to deal with the authorities. Of course, the most important thing is that the end has not come. That's what made him end up where he is now. Hey, what should I say? Fortune tricks people. Zhou Qi was tired, looked away, leaned back in his chair, and sighed inexplicably. He kept the time in mind all the time. From the time of the doomsday outbreak, 12 o'clock to the present, almost 40 or 50 minutes had passed, but the world still remained unchanged. There is no tidal force field that comes and goes, no one becomes a monster, there are no all kinds of disasters that are shattering, or strangely twisted rules. On the way to the police station, no harsh riots broke out anywhere, and no unexpected changes occurred. But, really didn't come? Although, countless times the doomsday comes at the same time 12 o'clock on May 30th, 2222. But don't take past experience for granted and embrace the future. This is the rule that he summed up through lessons after countless rebirths. What if it didn't come here, but it came from other places? What if it was just a different way? Zhou Qi really wanted to break free from the handcuffs, and wanted to go outside and tell everyone loudly, "Believe me, the end may still come, maybe it's just a little late, maybe it's already here." But at this moment, he suddenly felt a sense of tiredness. So he did nothing but slowly closed his eyes. In the rare peace, time passed little by little. The thoughts calmed down, and the words I heard not long ago couldn't help but emerge in my mind. If the end does not come, what will you do? Zhou Qi replied, "Then don't come." But in fact, the real meaning is that he doesn't know what to do. Because this is the first time he has experienced such a thing as the end did not come. I don't know if it's the last time. At this time, he felt very confused. It is said that it is the first awakening from a big dream, but it does not look like it, but it feels like a dream. The nightmarish scene is still vivid in my mind. After all, just 3 hours ago, he was still in a hell-like doomsday environment. Thinking back carefully, he suddenly realized that the doomsday experiences over and over again were more real to him. Because he lived in the apocalypse for much longer than the time he spent as an ordinary person in a normal environment. If he really didn't consider those issues of survival and crisis, and only considered real life, he would have almost forgotten that before this year, the 18 years that I have been an ordinary person have gone through. Click. Squeak, the sound of the door being opened. Zhou Qi slowly opened his eyes, straightened up, and found that it was Zhang Xiansheng and a young policewoman. They sat down, one facing Zhou Qi and the other sitting at the table. Perhaps because he was in a safe environment, Zhang Xiansheng looked very kind. He smiled and asked, "Are you tired?" Zhou Qi shook his head, "I'm not tired, it just hurts a bit." "That woman is too ruthless." Haha, Zhang Xiansheng was amused when he heard this complaining tone, and leaned back in his chair. "My niece, she has never suffered any loss since she was a child, she must be angry when she was kidnapped by her students this time. The focus is also normal. You can really make it up." Zhou Qi also laughed, "Professor Su's family is not ordinary. You are so messy with relationships, be careful to be dismissed and wear small shoes." Zhang Xianshen's smile froze, and the policewoman sitting next to him taking notes couldn't help but also laughed. She was used to Zhang Xiansheng coaxing and deceiving prisoners, and she saw him through the first time she saw him. Cough. Zhang Xiansheng was not embarrassed, he cleared his throat and said, "So you admit to kidnapping Professor Su?" "I didn't kidnap her. But we all saw it. I was afraid that when the end came, she would become..." "Stop, let's put the hypothetical event about the end of the day for a while, and now let's talk about what has happened." Zhou Qi pondered for a while. "Have you asked her to make a transcript?" "Not yet." "Then tell me in detail." "Tell me." Zhang Xiansheng gave him a deep look. "To tell the truth, quibbling and lying are meaningless, they will only waste your time." Zhou Qi's face gradually showed playfulness. "Well, let me put it this way, the main reason for this accident is based on a teacher's responsibility for students, not a long-planned kidnapping or any purposeful kidnapping. First of all, we had a conflict in class. Because of my depressed mood and nightmares, I deliberately made grandstanding and made doomsday remarks, and accidentally knocked down 2 students in the process." Zhang Xiansheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Accidental?" Zhou Qi nodded. "Yes, the whole class can testify." "Because they didn't see clearly." Zhang Xiansheng nodded and said, "Continue." Zhou Qi looked serious. "Then, I ran out and drove my car to leave, but in order to let me go back to class, Professor Su chased me all the way, blocked the road and got into my car." "Wait, is that your car?" "Oh yes, that car is not mine, but lent to me by my friend Lin Rui." Others at Yuuganshu www.yuuganshu.com can confirm that you can always find the classmates at the scene, such as another friend of mine Li Li. Qing classmate testified. Zhang Xianshen's mouth twitched. "This kid, he said just now that I can make up." He said angrily, "Then let me ask, why did your friend, Lin Rui, fall to the ground and still lie in the hospital?" "Well..." Zhou Qi showed a thoughtful expression. "I don't know about this, maybe it's because he suddenly had some kind of illness, I'll have to wait until he wakes up to talk about this." "Okay, continue talking about you and Professor Su." "Well, Professor Su took the initiative to get into my car, and after listening to me talking about my thoughts, he told me to go to the abandoned factory in the western suburbs of Zhonghai, saying that it was a good place to relax and relieve stress, and he wanted to teach me a lesson. Unfortunately, because I was in a hurry, I was misunderstood as kidnapping and called the police. As for tying her up with ropes, she asked for it, I think, maybe because of her personal hobbies." Sing, don't talk about it." Zhang Xiansheng couldn't help but waved his hand, then covered his forehead. After a few seconds, he put down his hand. "Then why did you attack the police later?" Zhou Qi looked innocent. "Assaulting the police? How dare I? Didn't I get arrested before I resisted?" The air quieted down. Only the rustling of the policewoman's writing remained in the room. After a few seconds, she stopped writing and looked up at Zhang Xiansheng. Zhang Xiansheng nodded. The two got up and left the room. But 2 minutes later, Zhang Xiansheng opened the door alone and walked in. He finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, let's talk about healing." "The camera is off." In the interrogation room, Zhou Qi asked with great interest. Zhang Xiansheng laughed dumbly, "You know everything." But then he shook his head again and said, "The camera is not off. I just made a normal record just now. Now is the time to get down to business." Zhou Qi looked at the cameras scattered in several corners. So, Zhang Xiansheng pointed to the direction of the wall. "Now there are a group of experts and professors standing outside. You know, they are all psychology majors." "Oh." Zhou Qi heard the words with a clear expression. In the past, when he dealt with the country, he had to have such a link. Because doomsday itself is an unfalsifiable proposition, no matter what method he uses to prove or explain it, the state will not believe it. There will always be a strict proof process. Well, that is to arrest him, interrogate him, ask words and the like, and let a lot of psychologists analyze whether he is lying and whether he has any other purpose. This caused Zhou Qi to spend a lot of time and experience, racking his brains to deal with the official. All kinds of psychological games, all kinds of routines and traps. And then slowly build up trust in the Runin and confrontation again and again. Therefore, Zhou Qi developed on his own in most cases. Not because of blind self-confidence, or because the pattern is too small. It's because, when the result has already been determined, it's too tiring to do that. At this point, Zhou Qi's eyes regained focus, then he moved his buttocks and asked, "Can you still talk about healing?" Zhang Xiansheng has been staring at him quietly. Hearing this, his expression did not change, but his eyes suddenly became much deeper. "If I can say it, I'm qualified to listen," Zhang Xiansheng said slowly. Zhou Qi pondered for a while. "What's wrong with you?" "Stomach signet ring cell cancer. It was discovered just a month ago. It's at an advanced stage." Zhang Xianshen's tone was flat, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him, but after he finished speaking, he paused and said, "Only conditional. If you don't allow it, don't say it, you have to say something that is real and useful. It means that if the disease must be cured because of the changes in the world after the apocalypse, then there is no need to say it. What Zhou Qi has to do now is to prove his worth in the normal world. Is that so?" Zhou Qi showed a thoughtful expression. Zhang Xiansheng stared at him. "I remember, there is a way." After a few seconds, Zhou Qi said with a serious face, "Can you give me a glass of water first?" "Any water will do, but it has to be boiled, not raw water." Zhang Xiansheng glanced at the camera. "Well, someone will hear it, and it will be delivered right away." "What else?" "Gone." "No more? Just a glass of water?" "Yes, but my requirement is that after the water is delivered, the camera must be turned off to ensure that no one knows what happened here, and it will be turned on again after a minute." Zhang Xianshen's expression was a little wrong. "What are you going to do?" "I'll treat you, and I'll make sure that the medicine will cure you." "Give me a glass of water to heal me? Are you fooling a ghost here?" "Okay, it's time to explain." Zhou Qi leaned forward and asked mysteriously, "Do you know the placebo effect?" Zhang Xiansheng showed doubts on his face. "What do you mean?" "Zhou Qi, to put it simply, you must first believe that this glass of water can cure you." Zhang Xiansheng. Seeing that his face was wrong, Zhou Qi quickly added, "That is to say, I will give you a hypnosis first. It doesn't matter if you don't know what it is, it will save you some effort later, but there must be some outsiders who know about it, so I will treat it later. When it's over, you can ask them." Zhang Xiansheng frowned, fell silent, and nodded very slowly. At the same time, the spacious hall, in front of the big monitoring screen, also fell into a strange atmosphere. At this moment, the hall is full of people of all kinds, roughly divided into two groups, one group is a group of experts, professors, and doctors with a more old-fashioned temperament and image. They are carefully staring at the various details of Zhou Qi in the interrogation room. Stop recording, analyzing, discussing. Su Xiun was also among them, but she didn't participate in any topic. She just sat on the edge, leaning her chin, watching quietly. The other gang is the police officers in uniform, including ordinary police officers and some senior cadres. At this moment, in the gang of the Public Security Bureau, an uncle from Mediterranean Sea who seemed to have a bad temper couldn't hold back. What kind of thing? It's a waste of time. Stop the trial, and quickly lock him up. He is the director of Shanghai City Public Security Bureau. After saying those words with a dark face, he was about to turn around and leave. But then someone stopped him. Director, why don't you look at it again? What if it really works? Yes, Director, no matter what, this kid is really special, we must give him a chance. The director of Mediterranean Sea had a face as dark as the bottom of a pot, and scolded when he opened his mouth. Are you out of your mind? Do you even dare to believe such a thing? If you have this skill, it is better to go to the temple and put incense sticks. Several police officers around wanted to say something, but looked at each other and sighed. Usually, the one who has the best relationship with Team Zhang is the director. Now, knowing that the other party has a terminal illness, the director must feel very uncomfortable. However, they are also suffering. It's true that advanced gastric cancer is still the most intractable signet ring cell cancer. How can it be cured so easily? What that kid said is mysterious, but it's actually psychotherapy. It's used in major hospitals, but it's really just like that, and the effect is very mediocre. Oh, you said, it's really good luck, that Lao Zhang would have this kind of disease. I asked before, and he said that he had a little stomach problem. His wife and children probably don't know yet. Yeah, but, without this kid, we wouldn't know. At this moment, a thin-looking senior cadre said slowly, Lu Bureau, let's listen first. Locking this kid up is not just to ask him how to treat his illness, but to consider the overall situation. The director of the Mediterranean Sea said angrily, the big picture. I think this kid is playing tricks. The older cadre looked at him and his eyes sank. Director Lu, do you usually have such a violent attitude towards prisoners? The director of Mediterranean Sea froze for a moment, and then realized that he was so dizzy that he dared to talk to the director like that. He calmed down, and although he was still a little angry, he finally waved his hand. Okay, look, I'll see how long this kid can pretend. After speaking, he folded his arms and continued to look. At this moment, in the interrogation room, the two were already chatting. Zhang Xiansheng asked in a casual tone, all of which sounded very common. What kind of girl do you like? What do you want to do in the future? Do you have a lot of contact with your family? Zhou Qi was quite interested, speaking in a straightforward manner. But those experts and professors who were observing outside, frowned more and more tightly. At this time, the door of the interrogation room was pushed open. The policewoman who took the notes before walked in with a pot of steaming hot water and an empty glass. Zhou Qi had a black line on his face. Why is it boiled water? Why is it just a cup? How can I drink it? The policewoman made a move. Zhang Xiansheng was also stunned. You want to drink too? Sure, I've been sitting for so long, and I haven't had a sip of water. Zhou Qi said with a dissatisfied expression, but then he saw the increasingly unkind eyes of the two policemen, and immediately changed the conversation. I mean, how can your captain drink this boiling water? Are you trying to scald him to death? Let me tell you, your stomach cancer has been cured, and esophageal cancer has come. The policewoman was a little embarrassed and looked at Zhang Xiansheng. Zhang Xiansheng waved his hand. It's fine, just let it cool down. The policewoman glared at Zhou Qi and walked out. When Zhou Qi saw this, he could only say angrily, okay, let's turn off the surveillance first. Zhang Xiansheng frowned, shut down now. Well, I've already prepared it. I can't wait any longer. Turn it off now, and then in a minute. Oh, the hot water will cool down for a while, so wait 3 minutes before turning it on again. Zhang Xiansheng glanced at the camera. Outside the interrogation room, the thin-looking director put his hands behind his back and said, "Close it." The director of Mediterranean Sea immediately retorted, "No, it can't be closed. This kid is too unreliable. What if there is an accident?" The director said, "If the special prisoner's chair and alloy handcuffs can't stop him, it doesn't make sense to close him or not." The director said stubbornly, "But, this is against the rules." The other police officers joined in. "Yes, it's not in compliance with the rules." The director shook his head, "The rules don't work here, we can't treat it with common sense." Another humane said, "There's no need to close it. He doesn't know whether we close it or not." But the director said calmly, "No, he knows." When everyone was puzzled, the director continued, "Do you remember the question that Captain Zhang asked after he went in and said that?" An old criminal policeman heard the words and said, "You mean, the camera is off?" This sentence? Yes, the director nodded slightly. When he asked this sentence, the expression on his face was very interesting. It seemed that he was waiting for Zhang Xiansheng to say closed, and then he couldn't wait to show something, but Zhang Xiansheng should also look at it. After that, Kaikan announced that he had told the truth, and then he quieted down. Oh! Some police officers suddenly realized that they were still puzzled before. Why did Team Zhang tell the truth directly after entering? If they were there, they would definitely start fooling around as soon as they entered. The director continued, "Besides, there are 3 cameras in the interrogation room. Only one was turned on when taking the transcript, and he only looked at that one. Now all 3 are turned on, and he has seen them all." "Hi!" a group of people gasped. And hearing this, the operator on the side silently turned off the cameras. In an instant, they lost all the pictures and sounds of the interrogation room. For a while, the hall was a little depressed. Many police officers began to discuss in a low voice, "Can a cup of boiling water cure cancer?" At this time, a handsome man with golden glasses came out of the gang of experts. He smiled and said, "Actually, this method is really possible to succeed. After all, in the medical field, there has always been psychotherapy, among which the most miraculous effect is cancer, as long as the patient is willing to believe that he can be cured, and face it with a positive and optimistic attitude every day, most of the cancer cells are killed." As soon as this statement came out, immediately attracted the attention of the police officers. The director of the Mediterranean Sea also looked over in surprise. Someone asked, "Everyone knows this, but this is obviously not a safe and practical way, right?" Someone agrees, "Yes, this kind of thing is easy to say, but it needs to be combined with drug treatment, and the effect is not necessarily good. No matter how much psychotherapy is used, in this environment, a glass of water can cure it. Then what's the use of a doctor?" The handsome man smiled noncommittally and continued, "It's a bit exaggerated, but it's not impossible. Do you know why this method doesn't work well? The crux of the problem is that cancer has become a problem in everyone's cognition. It is very difficult to overcome this mentality after a terminal illness, so it cannot be widely used." Immediately someone asked, "That is to say, as long as you find a way to convince Team Zhang that cancer is curable, that's all it takes?" The handsome man nodded slightly, "Yes, in a nutshell, so the focus is not on the glass of water, but on how to hypnotize Captain Zhang. This may sound outrageous, but it is scientifically based, and it has spread to many fields. Psychological, spiritual, biological, etc. We psychiatrists occasionally encounter this situation." The police officers looked at each other. "This is too evil to say." The handsome man smiled, "It's not evil, it's just that it's hard for ordinary people to get in touch. Like you said, this method also needs to be combined with physical therapy. Ordinary people can't even afford medicines, so how can they have the money to find them? What about a psychiatrist for treatment? So, this is actually not a matter of probability. If conditions permit, this is a miracle that can inevitably happen. So what? Director Liu of Mediterranean Sea frowned. After talking so much, is this kid reliable? The handsome man was silent for a while, and then he looked back at the experts whose faces were not very good looking, and said slowly, I don't know. The director's face was ugly again. I don't know. Said a lot. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com finally came to do not know? Are you kidding me here? At this moment, the handsome man sighed. Yes, in theory, there is a possibility of miracles, but at present, no one has been able to hypnotize people perfectly. The only thing we can conclude now is that he is very hypnotized. With self-confidence, we can't trace where his self-confidence came from, and we don't know how far he can achieve. In fact, we really can't be sure of him. We can't see anything useful at all from his words and deeds. Information, how to say it, in my opinion, his behavior, aimless, is pure play. At this time, other experts also noticed the conversation here. Someone came up, yes, in a way, he is like a child. Someone agrees, yes, a child who doesn't understand anything, acts without any scruples, does whatever he wants, and says whatever he wants. But it's not exactly like it, because the child seems to have no purpose, but it is also driven by instinct. I think so. Some people have discussed this issue. Suddenly, Su Xiun in the corner said, does that look like an old man? One has lived for many, many years, seen many, many things, has no desires, has no scruples, is like a child, an old man. As soon as these words were said, everyone was silent. It seems, yes. I remember, he said, that he was reborn hundreds of times. As the saying goes, a man is a boy until he dies. At this moment, someone asked, it seems, 3 minutes have passed. The camera is turned on, and what everyone sees is this picture. Zhou Qi sat in the same position nicely, and when he saw that the monitoring was turned on, he looked over at the first time and nodded. On the other side, Zhang Xiansheng was lying on the table, with one hand on his stomach hanging down weakly, the other hand on the table, holding the glass that had fallen down, with drops of water slowly flowing down the wall of the glass. The next second, under his head, there was a pool of blood, slowly spreading. Fuck! Hurry up and save people! Problem occurs. MLGB, I will kill him. Several police officers headed by Director Liu rushed to the interrogation room, and several doctors followed. A group of experts were a little surprised, and the discussion suddenly became louder. Faced with such a bizarre picture, people's already keen emotions can't help but magnify, and there is a riot in the field. There are only 3 who can keep calm. The director of the Public Security Department, a handsome man with golden eyes, both of them looked at the monitor with solemn expressions. And Su Xiun stood up and walked to the screen, frowning slightly. The handsome man noticed it and asked softly, do you care about him? Su Xiun's face returned to calm. He glanced at the man, and said, he's just a student. He's different from other students. It's the same for me. Okay. The handsome man was noncommittal and said nothing. Just then, someone came over. Dr. Yu, your phone number. Oh, okay. The handsome man glanced at Su Xiun and left. Su Xiun didn't look at him, just kept looking at the monitor. The other side, with a bang, the door of the interrogation room was slammed open. A group of people rushed to Zhang Xiansheng and helped him to lie down on the ground. Some doctors took a small flashlight and lit his eyes, some helped him measure his heartbeat and pulse, and some checked for wounds. Not far away, Zhou Qi was on the side. watching with interest. A criminal policeman came up and grabbed Zhou Qi's collar and said angrily, "What the did you do?" However, at this moment, cough, cough, Zhang Xiansheng sat up. He was breathing heavily, his eyes slowly focused. "Team Zhang, are you all right?" "Team Zhang, I'll take you to the hospital immediately." Zhang Xiansheng raised his hand, "Don't move, let me rest for a while." At this time, the doctor also put down the stethoscope. Although his brows were frowning, he said in his mouth, "It's not a big problem, you don't need to be nervous." Only then did everyone breathe a sigh of relief. He slowly helped Zhang Xiansheng up. Zhang Xiansheng took a deep breath and looked at Zhou Qi with extremely complicated eyes. Zhou Qi also looked at him and said seriously, "Your cancer cells have spread very seriously. If you can't cure it once, at least 3 courses of treatment." "Shut up for labor and management." The director of the Mediterranean gave him a stern look and shouted, "Boy, I don't know what you are, but now, you are in the police station. You are in my hands, you can continue to play tricks. Continue to pretend, but if I catch you, I'll kill you." "Old Lu." Zhang Xiansheng breathed out softly. "What's wrong? Can you do it, Mr. Zhang? How do you feel?" Director Lu glared at Zhou Qi and turned to look at Zhang Xiansheng. Zhang Xiansheng nodded and said calmly, "I suggest you put this kid aside for a while. I don't feel right now. Take me to the hospital for a check first, and it won't be too late to try him again after the results come out." When everyone heard the words, they suddenly became nervous. "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Zhang Xiansheng smiled and shook his head, "The stomach is hot and hot, maybe the water is too hot? But it's quite comfortable." Everyone was speechless. "Before you said this, you wiped the blood off your face. You're still joking." However, seeing Zhang Xiansheng seems to be really fine, there is no problem with his complexion, and everyone slowly relaxes. Director Lu said angrily, "Your mother is really a big injustice. You have such a serious illness, don't tell anyone? Are you a hero here? I don't think you are a sick person." The labor and management really want to give you a punch. Zhang Xiansheng laughed. Director Lu was cursing, but he still stretched out his hand to help him up. A group of people left the interrogation room, worrying that the voice of the words is gradually drifting away. At this moment, 2 policemen, a man and a woman, walked over with a cold face, untied Zhou Qi handcuffs, and pulled him out of the prisoner's chair. Zhou Qi quickly moved his stiff joints. "Where are we going?" The male policeman cast a glance at him. "Don't ask so many questions, just come with us." "Oh." Zhou Qi responded and followed the 2 policemen silently. However, before turning around the corridor, "Wait a moment." A cold voice came from behind several people. Zhou Qi was surprised when he heard this familiar voice. How did she come? The 2 police officers turned around, looked at each other, and asked, "Miss Su, what's the matter?" Su Xiun strode over, looked at the 2 policemen calmly and said, "Can I talk to him alone?" Zhou Qi looked back at her with an inexplicable smile on his face. The female police officer immediately refused. "He is very dangerous now, no." Su Xiun said lightly, "In the interrogation room, it's fine to have the surveillance on." The male policeman was a little confused. "Sorry, Miss Su, we can't decide this kind of thing without authorization." Su Xiun said, "According to the regulations, I am his teacher, the main witness of this incident, and the victim. I am qualified to confront him." The 2 policemen looked at each other again and said helplessly, "Miss Su, we still need to ask the superior." "You don't need to ask for instructions." Not far away, the voice of the director came. He walked slowly with 2 police officers, his face was warm. "Professor Su, you have worked hard, thank you for your information and help, this will help you arrange." "It's nothing." Su Xiun turned around and said lightly. 5 minutes later, Zhou Qi was taken to a certain room. This is a small meeting room. The style continues the strictness and rigidity of the security hall. There is only one round table, 2 small sofas for one person, a few simple potted plants, and a water dispenser in the corner. There are windows on both sides of the walls, one can see the outside street scene, and the other can see the people coming and going and the police officers stationed in the corridor. Su Xiun sat on one of the small sofas, holding a water glass, quietly looking out the window. Zhou Qi walked over and sat opposite her. After a long time, she suddenly turned her head, put down the water glass, and asked, "Do you regret it now?" Zhou Qi nodded silently, "It's a little bit, I finally know that people still have to keep hope, nothing is static, maybe a miracle will happen anytime." Su Xiun was non-committal. Zhou Qi asked again, "Professor Su, what do you want to talk to me about?" Su Xiun looked at him, "You still have one question that you haven't answered me." "What? What is the meaning of the end?" Zhou Qi blinked, "Didn't I say I don't know? You said that when the doomsday comes, I will know everything." Su Xiun looked at him coldly, "But the doomsday didn't come." Zhou Qi looked around. Su Xiun frowned slightly, "I'm talking to you." Zhou Qi was puzzled, "Ah, what did you say?" Su Xiun stared at him. Zhou Qi laughed dryly, "Ha, ha. Look at you, I'm just joking, you're always angry." Su Xiun said coldly, "Come on. It must be said, but before I said it." Zhou Qi did not answer neatly, but hesitated, "Professor Su, I will discuss something with you. Look, now that the end has not come, I don't want to talk to you anymore. After dealing with the authorities, when things are almost over, I will tell them, I am just an ordinary person, I don't want to do anything, I just want to go back to school and live a normal life." Su Xiun raised his eyebrows when he heard the words, stared at him for a while and then said, "So what?" Zhou Qi struggled for a while, with a rare twist on his face, "So, can you explain a little to the school for me, don't fire me." Su Xiun's mouth moved slightly, "You answer me first, and I will promise you." Zhou Qi looked disbelieving, "You are a bad woman, you have no evidence, why should I believe you?" Su Xiun got up and left, "Then you can stay here." "Alas!" Zhou Qi stopped her, I said it's not enough." Su Xiun sat down again and looked at Zhou Qi with deep eyes. "The meaning of doomsday is..." Zhou Qi looked serious, but halfway through, he suddenly hoarsely said "Abba" twice, and then he opened his mouth and said, "Hi, my throat is so dry, come on, I stopped smoking, and I talked to them for a long time just now, and I didn't drink a sip of water." Su Xiun's expression became colder, but after being silent for a few seconds, he got up and brought him a glass of water. But when she put the water in front of Zhou Qi looked at her innocently and dangled his handcuffs. The air is quiet. The two stared at each other for a long time. Su Xiun walked up to him, squeezed his chin, picked up the water glass and poured it into his mouth. "Thank you, Professor Su." Slow down." Zhou Qi took a big gulp. Because it was too fast, the water flowed down from both sides. And after he tried his best to drink a whole glass of water, he turned his head and coughed twice. Su Xiun took the water glass and went back to sit opposite him, looking at him coldly. Zhou Qi looked at her and said cautiously, "I'm still a little hungry." Boom! Oh shit! The water glass hit Zhou Qi directly on the head, he cried out in pain, raised his handcuffed hands to cover his head. Fortunately, it was a plastic water cup, otherwise, with Su Xiun's strength, he would have to smash his head with blood. "You are so violent, Professor Su, just because of such a question, you treat your students like this. Come on." Su Xiun said coldly. "Okay." Zhou Qi smacked his lips and looked at her with a strange look in his eyes. Even, with an inexplicable pity, then, he shook his head and said slowly, I don't know why you are interested in this question, I can only tell you. The end of the day has no meaning. Su Xiun narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at Zhou Qi dangerously. Zhou Qi was helpless. Professor Su, don't look at me like that, I'm not kidding this time. So, it doesn't make sense, what does it mean? Su Xiun asked. Zhou Qi sighed. He leaned back on the back of the sofa and began to speak gently, it doesn't make sense, just literally. For example, when we are playing an ordinary game, we can study how to clear it, we can also study the strategy of fighting the boss, we can also study the plot, look for Easter eggs, and then play dress up when we have nothing to do, and dress up beautifully. But that's because the game is made by us, and the meaning is given to it by the development team, whether it is money-making, ingenuity, or thought-provoking. These are all given by the creator. What about this end? As he told the story, Zhou Qi's eyes gradually lost focus, as if he was caught in memory, or thought of something, and a trace of pity appeared on his face again, but this was not for Su Xiun, but for what he was thinking about. Things. He murmured in his mouth, we don't know who created it, nor what its purpose is. It's like a program that was made up by a beginner game maker. After setting a few rules and logic, it was thrown there. And we humans are surrounded by inexplicable, it doesn't matter whether we want to play or not, it is encountered by the unlucky us, why not play? The world is destroyed, play it, it's full of data errors, bad balance, and bugs like me. Speaking of this, Zhou Qi's eyes returned to focus and he sighed, you said, what's the meaning of such a thing? The air fell into a long silence. This swears that the conversation is over. Su Xiun's expression darkened, maybe he heard it, or maybe he was not satisfied with this explanation. In short, she didn't give any evaluation or accurate answer. She just sat there, stared silently for a while, then took a deep look at Zhou Qi, then got up and walked towards the door of the room. Zhou Qi's body followed her movement, but he couldn't say what he wanted to say. I can't escape my punishment at school. Zhou Qi sadly watched her thin back disappear outside the door. Suddenly, he reacted. It's not right. Now that the apocalypse is over, why is the reality so cruel? Wouldn't it be nice to just say something nice to coax her? If you have to be so serious, what if you make someone depressed? Zhou Qi was a little worried, but after thinking about it, she is Su Xiun, who can take on the important task of commanding in the apocalypse. Reading www.yuuganshu.com has a good psychological quality, this little thing can't hit her. And, what if it sounds good? Could she still give herself a reward? Since she wants to know the truth, tell her. Squeak. The door was not closed. As soon as Su Xiun disappeared from the door, the police came in. Okay, let's go. The male police officer said something casually. It seems that the attitude is not as bad as it was just now, and I don't know what I am doing outside now. Okay. Zhou Qi didn't think much, nodded, got up and followed him away. It was still the two police officers, a man and a woman. They took Zhou Qi through several corridors, and through several blockades, he took Zhou Qi to a small cell. Oh, it's not a cell. The Public Security Bureau has no place to detain prisoners. This is a detention room, so you can only stay here for no more than 24 hours. Even the door is just a normal door. Click, click. The handcuffs were untied, and the policewoman tilted her head to indicate, come in, dinner will be brought to you later. Okay, thanks. Zhou Qi rubbed his wrist that was finally freed from the shackles, looked around and walked in. It is said to be temporarily detained and kept for inspection, but the internal facilities here are quite complete, with clean single beds, small tables and chairs. In addition to this, there are even miniature independent bathrooms. Since then, apart from no except for TV, air conditioner and computer, it is almost the same as the hotel outside. Zhou Qi couldn't help but exclaimed softly. The treatment was pretty good this time. Finally I can rest.